Hello, hello. Hopefully everybody can hear me. My name is Kelly Wayment, and I am here with Silhouette to show you a fun and easy Father's Day project, and we'll learn a little bit about heat transfer vinyl. So this is actually the project we're making. It is an apron. This says head chef, and I'll show you how to get that design and how you can manipulate it if you want. And then we're going to also make a little side assistant chef apron. So we'll do both of those at the same time. So I love heat transfer. I don't do a lot of classes about it just because it kind of feels like it's cheating because it's so easy. So hopefully if you're a beginner, you'll find this an easy project. And if you have been using Silhouette for a while or using other products, then hopefully you'll still have a good time and learn something new. So I'm going to move my little mannequin back here, and we'll go over the supplies. So I am using a Silhouette Cameo 5, but the project is small enough that you could probably use a portrait, and there's nothing really fancy about it, so you can use an older machine as well. So any Silhouette machine will work. I'm going to use the Cameo 5, and since I'm using rolled heat transfer, I am going to use the roll feeder that goes with it. But that's optional. You don't have to use it. We are using a couple of aprons. So if you're at Michael's and you're looking for the right apron, I'm just using the Make Market brand. So I've got an adult size in black and a child size in black, but of course you can choose whatever you want. Heat transfer sticks to pretty much any fabric. And so you're fine with any cotton or polyester apron. So I've got an adult apron and a child apron. And then heat transfer itself, I am using the Silhouette Smooth Heat Transfer. It comes in a 12-inch width or a 9-inch width, but I know Michael sells a lot of different brands of heat transfer, and you can use any heat transfer you want for this project. It's a single layer, and the fabric we're using is standard, so any heat transfer, any color. I like the white because it really pops on the black, but you can use any color. But the nice thing about the Silhouette machine is it cuts all different brands of heat transfer. We are going to use a ruler. I've got a tape measure, but you can use a smaller ruler if you need to. Scissors, a paper trimmer, one or both, something you'll be able to trim things down. We'll use a weeding tool, and let's see. I'm going to show you a tip that uses a printer. So if you have a printer in your home, you might want to use that, but that's an optional step that I will show you later. This is a protective sheet. So since it's heat transfer material, it's also called HTV, heat transfer vinyl, iron-on vinyl. Those are all names for heat transfer. You can use a household iron, or you can use a heat press or a hand press. I've got the Crochet. It's not available yet, but I'm using it because I've got it here in the office. If you're using an iron, I would say a cotton setting, never use steam. The Crochet, I'm turning it just past the medium heat setting. It's got a dial, and so I'm just going just slightly past medium. And then this is a piece of parchment paper. You just need something thin to cover your design. Usually it's okay to iron directly onto the carrier material that the heat transfer is on. But just to be safe, it's nice to have a piece of parchment paper. You can buy Teflon sheets that can either go in the oven or you can use with a heat press. It's just a thin, heat-resistant sheet, even a thin cloth, just something that's an extra layer. I've even used a piece of paper just thin copy paper on top. Okay, so I think that's all for supplies. And then if you are in the chat, if you have questions, just let me know. And I've got Jackie will read me any questions that you might have, and it can be basic or further. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And if you would let me know in the chat, maybe what machine you're using, if you're a beginner to the Silhouette machine or beginner to heat transfer, kind of helps me know if you're experienced or beginner as I tailor the class to you a little bit. All right, so let's go ahead, and the first thing we want to do when we're starting a heat transfer project is to measure the space that we are working with. So I have got my apron here. And this design, it's got kind of, it opens and gets a little bigger as it goes down. So we're really just trying to make sure that this most narrow section of the design we can fit in the apron. Now you don't ever want your design to go all the way to the edge, and there's a couple reasons for that. On this one there is a seam, and anytime you have a seam, that can affect the pressure getting to your design all the way. So for mechanical purposes, you don't want your design really close to any seam if you can avoid it. And then visually, you also need to create what's called white space on the side. So you wouldn't want it to go all the way to the edge. You want to leave a little bit of area on the side. So we're going to measure. And let's see, so 6 inches gives me that little bit of space on the side. So I'm going to say a maximum of 6 inches wide for my larger apron. And then, of course, we've got all the room in the world for below. So I'm really only worried about my dimension from side to side. And then for the child size apron, same thing. I want to leave a little bit of space. Could probably go up to 5 inches wide. That'll still give me space on the side. Okay, so now we know our dimensions that we have to work with. We can go into the software. Oh yes, do we have a question?
So 2 people both said that they have Silhouette Cameo 4s and have never used them.
Oh, great. Great. I'm so glad you're here. Cameo 4 is a great machine. It has a different type of roll feeder. So I'll mention that when we get to it. And you don't actually have to use a roll feeder at all. But heat transfer is a great first project for you. Okay, so let's go into the software. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so you should be seeing the Silhouette Studio software. Now, when you first open Silhouette Studio version 5, you're going to get a home page. So all you need to do to get into the part where you're designing is to go into this tab that says Design. And this is where you'll do all of your magic for creating designs, manipulating designs, everything like that. So we are first going to, because we measured the space we needed, now we're just going to draw a reference rectangle. So over here on the left is a drawing tool, and I'm just going to grab my rectangle, draw a rectangle tool, and just click and drag. Now as you drag over and down, you'll see that these dimensions change. And so I want to make it about 6 inches wide. It can be slightly less than that. And the height itself doesn't really matter. But that's 6 inches wide. You can see that 6 inches right there is kind of the limit we want on our design for width, and that's for the larger apron. And then for the smaller apron, again, I'm going to go over here to the left side, draw a rectangle, click and drag, and I'm going to do a 5-inch wide rectangle. Okay, and now you can see on my screen I've got, hopefully you can see it, I've got some grid marks on my screen, but those I have turned on. So if you don't see grid marks, all you need to do is type the G on your keyboard, G for grid, and then you can type G for grid again to just toggle those on and off. And some people like to see the grid marks, some people don't. It's kind of a personal preference thing. So for the moment, I'll just leave those on. It kind of gives me an idea of where my space is, and those are inch divisions. Okay, now for the design, I've already opened I've already downloaded the design. So it is called Head Chef or Assistant Chef. If you need to buy it from the design store, it is number 1269866. So if you haven't already downloaded that, you would just go to a web browser and type in silhouettedesignstore.com. And you can either type in Head Chef and it'll probably bring it up, or you can type in the design number 1269866. And there it is. Click on it. And it's pretty straightforward. You can just purchase the design. So once you actually purchase that, looks like it's being a little bit slow. You would add it to your cart, you would check out, and make sure you sign in, and it will load automatically to your library. So we have a library tab in Silhouette Studio, and it will go into a folder called Recent Downloads. But again, there's a search bar here that if you just typed in like Head Chef, it'll bring it up. Okay, so we're going to double click that to open. And for now, we're just going to set the page setup to letter size. So make sure you set your machine. If it doesn't automatically set it for you, make sure you set your machine. So for me, I've got the Cameo 5, but if you have the Cameo 4, that's on the list as well. You can leave the feed type if it shows up. You can leave it as auto. Your cutting mat doesn't really matter right now. For now, I've got it as a 12 by 12 inch cutting mat. And the media size, we're going to be moving to 12-inch wide and no mat. But for now, I actually like to print out these, my designs as a reference. So I'm going to switch it to letter size. All right, so what I want to do is I want to make sure that this design, the top part of it at least, remember the apron itself gets wider, and so we don't need to worry about how wide that lower portion is. We just need to make sure that this top part fits within that 6-inch wide, and it does. If it doesn't, you can grab a corner handle and shrink or enlarge that by just dragging a corner handle. And let's see, that's at 6 inches wide, but I'm going to go ahead and click undo so it goes back to exactly where it was. All right, so that first design for the adult size apron is fine. And then I can just do this over in the side. Make sure that my assistant chef also fits. That's pretty close. It's about 5 inches wide. It fits about in that rectangle. And again, you can just drag with a corner handle if you need that larger or smaller for the area that you've got. All right, now if you like the text, but you don't like the extra little elements at the bottom, you can actually ungroup those and just use the parts that you want. So there's several ways to ungroup. up here in the quick access toolbar, if I have an item selected, then you can choose ungroup selected shapes. You can also right click and choose ungroup. And there's also a keyboard shortcut. I'm not going to worry about that one. I'm going to select it and ungroup up here on the quick access toolbar. So if you don't want to use those little extras and you just like the wording and you want to put a different picture, you can, or just use the wording. If you want to use these parts of the design on some other project, you absolutely can do that. You have access to them just by ungrouping them. I'm going to undo a couple times and get back to where it was because I am going to keep those together. I just wanted to show you that you could ungroup those and just use the elements that you want. All right, now to get a good idea of how it's going to look on my actual apron, I will sometimes, you can leave it black and print in black, or you can change the color to a little lighter color if you're just going to save ink. There's a gray. This is the fill color that you can change. And then we would just print it. So there's this print button, says send to printer. And you can see how that's going to look on a letter size piece of paper. It's going to cut off maybe just a tip because it's over the printable area, but it's still going to give you a good idea. You would just click print and then you would choose your printer, maybe go to preferences and make sure it's going to print how you want, and then print. And then you would go ahead and do the same thing after you've printed this one. You can also print this, the smaller design. Just go ahead again, use your printer icon and send that to your printer. All right, so what you get is you get a couple of printouts and then you just cut around them with scissors so it's kind of close. So this is just my personal hack that I use for trying to make sure that my heat transfer design actually is going to fit well. And so then you can see, oh, and we've got a question. Oh, okay.
Software, this was wondering how similar the software is to like Canva.
Okay, so the questions are, do we have a mobile app? And the answer is yes. It's called Silhouette Go. That you can get from the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. That is a good option if you already have designs and you're kind of streamlining, you want to be able to work away from your computer. So that you don't have as many designing capabilities in the mobile app as you do in Silhouette Studio. And then the other question is, how does Silhouette Studio compare to Canva? And I have not used Canva a lot, but Silhouette Studio, yeah, Silhouette Studio has a lot more features. It's just quite a bit easier to use, actually. You can position everything, resize everything. We also have Silhouette Web that you can use on a Google Chrome browser. And so you can use it without any software downloaded. And that is actually a really good option too. It has pretty much most of the same features as Silhouette Studio, the full version, the full basic version. And so I would say if you're not downloading the software, that if you don't want to download Silhouette Studio, Silhouette Web is your closest alternative. And then Silhouette Go is the mobile app that it's a little more pared down. You have slightly less options in Silhouette Go. So hopefully that answers your question. Silhouette Studio on the desktop is my favorite. You can also upgrade to like Business Edition and get lots more features. Okay, another question or comment?
So when I tried to use my machine, I sent the picture or shapes to the machine, the shapes did not actually cut. Why would that happen?
Okay, so if you, and we'll get to that, when you are trying to actually send your designs, you need to make sure that your cut lines are turned on. So it kind of depends on where those designs came from. If they are already a cutting file or you bought them from the library, the cut line should be turned on. But if you maybe brought a picture in, that would not have cut lines already assigned to it. So if you don't have bold lines in your send panel preview, then that would be one reason why it wouldn't cut. Another comment?
They're just asking for a little bit of clarification. She says, but when you say you sent it to the printer, did that mean the silhouette printed the image?
Okay, so these printouts, these are sent, and what I just showed in the software, the question is, did I send it to the printer? Does that mean I send it to the Silhouette or did I send it to a printer? So these I sent to an actual printer. So I used the print option in Silhouette Studio, and I chose my printer. So I've got a Canon printer and I sent it to my Canon printer, and it printed these out on letter size paper. I cut them out. When you're sending it to your machine, you're using a different function. It's the send panel. So these are actual printouts from my home printer. I've cut them out, and then I can see if they're too big or too small, because it's a lot easier to resize this and print it again and check it against, instead of actually cutting my heat transfer and finding out it was way too big, because I didn't realize. So this is a good way of finding out if your design is actually going to fit the space that you have, because you can reprint for a lot cheaper. That makes sense? So these are actually just throwaway pieces at this point. We don't actually need to keep those. They were just to make sure that my design was right. And that's totally optional. It's just a Kelly thing. I do it to save save time and heartache and money. All right, so those are good. I'm going to share my screen again, go back to the software. All right, so I've got my designs in the right size. I can get rid of those rectangles now. You'll notice those rectangles didn't actually print because they're not filled with color. The designs themselves are filled with color, and so they know, that's how the printer knows to actually print them. Okay, so now I need to set my page setup for what I'm actually going to use. So here I've still got my page setup, and I've got my machine selected. Now my cutting mat, I'm actually going to go with no cutting mat this time. The Silhouette machine can cut without a mat on material that has its own backing. And so I'm going to say none for my cutting mat. And then my media size, I just set it to the size of the roll that I'm using. So I am using a 12-inch wide roll, and then you can set it to any height that you want. I'll just make it a little longer than 12 inches. So now it's just a matter of positioning these on my area. So I've got my cut border showing. You want to make sure that you always have your cut border showing. This is this little red line. That means that's the area that the machine itself will not cut outside of. And let's see, to turn on the cut border in Silhouette Studio version 5, you go to your tab that shows the grid, the little grid icon, and you can check this box for show cut border. In older versions of Silhouette Studio, it was on this first page down towards the bottom, but you always want to have that show cut border so you know you're not accidentally putting your design outside of that little red cut border. Okay, so I'm going to bring both of these over. And I can have them pretty close to each other, because we're just going to cut them apart after they have gone through cutting both of them. Now, another key element of using heat transfer is it is actually going to be cutting on the back side of your material. So especially if you're using words or something that you'll notice if it's a mirror image, you want to make sure that you flip those horizontally. So I'm going to select both of those pieces, and then I'm going to right click and choose flip horizontally. We want to cut a mirror image because we're going to be cutting into the back side of the heat transfer material itself. And so always, always you're going to flip your image for heat transfer. And it'll give you the option to do that later on when you're in the send panel, but I really like to do it myself. I like to keep that control. Okay. Now, if you want, you can add some weeding boxes. It'll make it easier to kind of peel this apart. So you can draw more rectangles, or you can kind of use the rectangles you started with. So let me zoom in just a little bit here. And I'm going to turn off the grid lines so those aren't in the way. So I've got this rectangle here that I'm just going to get it close to the letters and make sure it doesn't cut into the letters. So over here, that's going to cut into the little spatula. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust those cut lines a little bit. So I'm going to double click to enter point edit mode, and I can actually add points and then drag this around so it's not cutting into other parts of my design. I can also draw lines. This is optional, but it kind of is helpful. If you have business edition, you can create weed lines, although on this design itself, it doesn't lend itself great to the automatic weed lines just because things are tight together. So I would use boxes and lines, your two drawing tools here on the left. Let's see, zoom out a little bit. So same thing, I want the lines, let's see, go back to my select tool. If you don't want those points there and you just want to move the whole object, you can go back to your select tool here at the top left. So now I can drag. Just keep an eye out for, you don't want any of these lines to cut into any other parts of the design. So boxes and lines. Let's see, I'm gonna also draw a line almost to the border. Make sure it doesn't actually touch any of the design I want for cutting. So this is just going to kind of, it's actually also going to help me conserve some of my heat transfer in the end. Because it won't peel away all of these extra parts that I can save for another project. So these are just lines and boxes to kind of make this easier to weed and will help me conserve some of the material. And you'll see that when we actually get to weeding. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to move it all down just a little bit. Make sure everything is within the cut boundary. And that looks pretty good. All right, so now let me show you how I'm going to load this material. we'll go ahead and go to the overhead shot, I think. Yeah, another question or comment? So the question is it only HTV or heat transfer that doesn't require a cutting mat? And the answer is no. You can cut pretty much anything that has its own backing. So heat transfer vinyl has its own backing, so you can cut that without a mat. Vinyl has its own backing, which is an adhesive vinyl that's got a sticky back. That can be cut without a mat. Sticker paper, there's all kinds of sticker paper, and you can cut those without a mat. And technically, with the Silhouette Cameo, I think 4 and higher, you can cut even cardstock without a mat because it's got a groove where the blade will not cut and damage itself. But that's not my favorite. I still like, if it's cutting all the way through a material, I still generally like a mat or to have, yeah, and to have a backing. So heat transfer, stickers, and vinyl are the most common materials you don't need a mat for. All right, so here is our roll feeder. This is the one that comes with the Cameo 5, and it's nice because you can set it aside when you don't need it. Just gonna open that up. The Cameo 4 actually has a pull-out roll feeder, and so the elements are kind of the same. It's got these little pop-up flaps. And a slot for the media to go through. So what we're doing is we're cutting on the dull side of the heat transfer, and the glossy side is the part that's going down. So the glossy part is the carrier sheet or the backing that this heat transfer is attached to. And so we're going to cut on the back side, the dull side, in reverse. So when we flip it over to iron it on, it's going to look good. All right, so got my roll here. Fits into the roll feeder. I've slid this up the front, and I need to make sure that my rollers so the parts that actually roll, there's a roller here and a roller here, and I need to make sure that my right side is adjusted to actually be rolling against the material. So with the Cameo 5, you lift it up and slide it over, and you'll feel a little groove, and you'll actually see that the roll, the little roller wheel can grip your media. There's a slightly different adjustment mechanism for the Cameo 4, but you also can adjust it. All right, so when I've got both those wheels on my material and I'm using the guideline for the left side of the material, then I'll just press load. All right, and then I like to double check and make sure that that loaded evenly. So I'm checking that little gap on both sides to make sure that it loaded evenly. And the rollers are gripping. The other thing I like to do, especially if you are, if your material has quite a tight rolled memory in it, so it wants to curl up the front, I will actually use this little down arrow because it's talking about you're imagining moving the blade down. So use this down arrow, not the unload button, but the down arrow. And I'm going to move the front edge so it's just slightly tucked under there. So it'll make a little less noise and go a little smoother. Okay, so now let's go back into the software. And now that we're ready to cut, the place that we do that is in the send panel. So I'm going to go over to the send tab over here. And if you are in Silhouette Studio version 5, it's going to start with a guided mode. But I've got, I already connected. So you'll choose your machine to connect by Bluetooth, hit connect, and it'll actually guide you through all the steps you need. But I know what I'm doing. So I'm just going to go straight to standard mode, and you can copy me as well. So I have loaded my material. It says ready, and I want to make sure I'm in tool holder 1. Now right here is where you are double checking that you have cut lines. So one of the questions was about not actually cutting when you send it. You have to have bold lines here so it knows what to cut. So I've got bold lines here, all of my weed lines, my design itself, so I know that that's going to cut. If you need to change some of that, you would select the parts you need to change, and then you can choose down here what you want to cut. So you can completely turn off by ignore selected lines. I'm using tool 1, which is my Autoblade, and I'm using all selected lines. So here in Material Action and Tool, I want my heat transfer smooth. It's my option. If you don't have that already selected, you can just click the little drop down arrow and find it. You can even type in the search bar. You can click the little filter button for heat transfer, but we're doing heat transfer smooth. We want it to cut, and it's got the auto blade detected, and that's all automatic if you're using the auto blade. Now for the settings, I actually bump mine up just a little bit. So when I'm doing heat transfer smooth, I want my blade depth on 2, speed on 8 is good, but my force kind of depends a little on the age of the material, and this is where you'll change it for different brands of heat transfer. Might change slightly on the force. This is such a thin material that you're probably not going to mess much with the blade depth, but your force is where you're going to make that minute adjustment. So I'm going to do mine on 8, and then I'm going to generate a test shape. So we're just going to test it out. So click generate test shape, and you can see that that has popped in a little shape for a triangle and a square, and that can be moved around in Silhouette Studio version 5. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it here in the upper left corner, and I'm going to say send test, and I'll do that. I'm going to stop my share, but I'm going to click just the send test, not the send, that'll send your whole design, but send test is going to do just the little test shape. So all right, and so what we're looking for, I'm going to unload that. And what we're looking for is to have the square release easily from the triangle and leave the triangle behind. So it's kind of hard to see sometimes on heat transfer where that is. But kind of if you either peel it back a little bit, you can see those lines appear, or if you put it on a light table or up to a window. So what I want is to leave the triangle behind. Yeah, that's pretty good. I could maybe do the force one more little bit, but that felt like it came away pretty smooth. So there was my test shape, and I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to reload it. Left edge along the guideline. My load button, double check that that fed in evenly, and then scroll down a little bit so that front edge is kind of tucked under. And now, I'm not going to show you in the software again, but it is just the send button instead of send test. So the big send button is what I'm going to send. Let's see. I'm going to show you this one thing. So when I click send, it's got this little reminder, have you mirrored? And since we did mirror already, we can just say send as is. And it's giving me a little warning about some of my cut lines. That's just because we got those weed lines really close to the border, but I can see that my design itself is within the red cut border. So I'm just going to say, yes, I want to continue. And then it gives me a reminder to load it and what blade to use, and click send. Oh, do we have a question?
Vinyl.
Okay, so the question is, what's the difference between permanent and removable vinyl, and are they both waterproof? So first, the second answer is yes, they're both waterproof. The difference is the adhesive level and strength. So removable vinyl has a little lighter bit of adhesive. So if you're trying to get it to last a lot longer, you would probably use permanent vinyl. If you want to be able to take it off easily, use removable vinyl. So like any outdoor surface, like if you're putting vinyl on your door or your mailbox, that I would say use a permanent vinyl. And then if you are maybe, and it kind of depends on the texture of your walls. If you have a texture to your walls at home and you're trying to put vinyl on your walls, the removable might not stick as well. But if you're like maybe renting or something and you just want vinyl on there temporarily, you would use the removable vinyl. Um, and but pretty much any smooth surface, either one is going to stick to really well. If you want to be able to take it off easier, use the removable vinyl. I'm watching this. I may not have gotten that loaded completely straight. I'm just watching my roller there to make sure it doesn't slide out. It'll go crazy if it slides out of one of the rollers. Hopefully it'll be okay. Um, if you're doing like a vinyl, and this we're talking about adhesive vinyl, not heat transfer that we're using here. If you're doing like a mug or putting it on a tumbler, I would use permanent vinyl because that'll withstand washing a little bit better. So generally, you probably want to hand wash a mug that you put removable or any vinyl on. But I have one mug that has withstood the dishwasher for probably a decade. That it's still going with the, all right, that did slide out. Okay, I'm just going to unload that. There's no salvaging that. Okay, sorry. That looks like it was trying to do I'm not quite sure what it was trying to do. I'm going to turn the machine off, press and hold, and that'll release where all the grippy things, and I can pull this out. Okay, this doesn't usually happen, guys. It's only because I'm on camera. All right, hopefully we got enough of our design that'll be okay. Since that got jammed up, I'm going to slide my roller all the way to the side, or my blade housing all the way to the right side. So then when I turn it on, it's going to reset, and any misalignment that would have occurred is going to be reset. All right, I'm not going to try and recut that because I'm not sure we'll have time. But that's just a good reminder to watch and make sure that it loads straight in and make sure that your rollers are gripping the whole time. Let's go ahead and move that, and we will see about weeding this and see if we got the whole design. Hopefully we got one of them. All right, now heat transfer is a little bit hard to see where the edge is. Okay, so there's my little spatula, it looks, or my whisk for the child apron, and I think that is the lowest point. So I'm going to kind of feel, make sure it's not cut below there. And we're going to just trim this off. Okay. Just feeling to make sure it's not cut below this area. The more you work with heat transfer, the more you'll get used to it as a medium, and it just takes a little bit of experience, and then you'll be like, oh yeah, I got this. This is easy. All right, so let's go ahead and start weeding. Here's one of these rectangles that I drew. And so that's a good place to start, is where you know there's a rectangle. These weeding lines. That way you know you're pulling away the correct part. So what we're doing is we're weeding, like in a garden, you're weeding the stuff that you don't want, and you're leaving the parts that should be applied. So here's where a weeding tool is helpful. Depending on how intricate your design is, you can just use your fingers, and especially on heat transfer. So if you're using adhesive vinyl, all this extra stuff is sticky, but on heat transfer, it's not. It is sticking to the carrier sheet because the carrier sheet is sticky. Right, still looking for those weed lines that I created.
You have a comment?
Okay, comment.
It helps for my own mishaps in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, well, you can, anytime I'm doing a live class, there's usually something that goes wrong. So you can watch and see how I recover. It happens to everyone. Yep, no machine runs perfectly. All right, I'm going to grab my scissors and kind of save some of this. Oh, it looks like I didn't get very much of my assistant chef. Maybe I got the words, but not the little designs before it lost its grip and went out of control. And what I could do is, once I know what part didn't work, I could cut just that part and just apply it in two parts. It's not that big of a deal. All right. So here's my assistant. Hopefully it got the chef part. All right, so all we lost was the little smaller chef hat and the whisk. And so I could actually put a roll back in. I can move on my software, I can move everything off to the side. So in Silhouette Studio, whatever's not on your virtual mat is what we'll cut. So I could just move everything off to the side, just keep those two elements. You know how I showed you how to ungroup it earlier? You could ungroup just the little smaller chef's hat and the whisk and move them back over onto the virtual mat and just cut those two pieces. And then I would have a second piece to still get my complete design. It would just take a little bit longer. So I'm not going to do that here, but that's how you would fix that. Oh, my heat press is warm. Might just turn up just a little bit more. And last little elements of my design. Sometimes you kind of have to guess where those are. And I poked a little bit into the heat transfer right there, but you're not actually going to see that once it gets pressed on. Okay, so now I've got my larger head chef and my smaller assistant chef, and we're just going to go with, and I can add those other parts later. So I'm just going to cut these apart with scissors. This does not have to be super accurate because the only thing that's going to be left behind is the design itself. So the borders don't matter. I'm going to pull off that so I don't forget. And get that stuck on there. All right, now these are big enough scraps, so I'm going to save them for another project. And since this is kind of a weird shape and won't fit into the machine, to do this later, I would actually stick this on the cutting mat. And then your kind of your awkward size doesn't really matter. So I've got all of this stuff I can still use later, and I would just use it on the cutting mat later. So save your scraps if they're big enough. Okay, we're getting close. Pressing it is usually the easy part. This is where you would want to make sure that your iron is hot or your heat press is hot. Okay, and since we cut away all these edges, you want to make sure that any of these little bits on the side of heat transfer are gone. So I've got a tiny little bit there. I want to make sure that is removed. I've got a little speck right here. I want to make sure that's removed because those will press onto your design. So kind of give it a good look over before you try and press that on. But that looks pretty good. We'll start with our assistant chef. Now this has a sticky backing that does pretty good. I would also use a lint roller right here and make sure you don't have any extra stuff on your, oops, there's another little bit of white on the edge. I want to make sure that's gone. So you don't have a bunch of lint and thread and stuff that's in your way. Okay, so you can kind of line it up. They do make heat tape, a heat resistant tape that you can use to help keep that in place. I think I'm pretty good. I feel like I'm centered. All right, so what I'm gonna do is hold that in place, bring it over to my heat press, and I wanna make sure that like the straps, nothing is under there, nothing's lumpy. And then I'm gonna get my protective sheet. And at least I'm going to feel and make sure that that's complete. The platform is completely under there, so it's not going off the side. And I'll just kind of roll up this to stay out of the way. And go ahead and bring it down. Press. Let's see. Okay, it stopped beeping. It had been 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I can't remember what the automatic timer is. So we're just going to let this sit until it beeps. If you are doing a heat press, smooth heat transfer, I think is usually about 300 to 310 degrees. If you have an actual temperature or it's a cotton setting on your iron, this we're just doing slightly past medium because it's going to stay for the full 45 seconds. If you are doing it like 305 or 310, you probably only need about 15 seconds. You'll get used to whatever heat press you have. Okay, so that's the beep telling me it's done. So we'll pull that off of there. And that, I feel like it needs a little bit longer, a little bit hotter. So we'll let that cool. A lot of this, you figure it out as you go. You just don't peel away the liner until the design completely stays in place. So you always peel it away slowly and make sure that it's going to stay in place. Now this one we're going to do in 2 parts because the whole thing won't fit. All right, so trying to keep any lumps and bumps away. Okay. So we'll do that in 2 parts. We'll get the first part done and then finish it up. All right, so that's not sticking very well. So we'll press that one again. Any more questions?
One question.
Okay.
If using an iron set on cotton, do you continue to move the iron across the image or leave it sitting on certain areas?
So I will usually not rub it around. The question is, if you're using an iron, do you move the iron? I will usually push it down and press in one place and then lift it and press. The risk you take by moving it around is you could shift your design, and you don't want that to happen. So with an iron, I will usually just press it down, hold it for a little while, and then move it along. Lift and put it into a new position until you've got the whole thing. Just waiting for the timer. If you're in a hurry, the 45 seconds feels long. If you're multitasking and doing other things, the 45 seconds feels really short. That's why the little beep is nice. All right, we'll move this. We'll press the smaller one more time. And we'll see if this higher temperature made a difference. No, it still doesn't want to stick. Okay, so what it should look like when you are removing the carrier sheet is it should just lift away smoothly and leave your design there. If you notice your design sticking to your carrier sheet, that's how you know it didn't get enough time or pressure, and you just lay it carefully back down and just press it a little bit longer. All right, so I'm getting a little bit where it wants to cling a little bit here. Yeah, so the top part, I think, didn't get quite enough. So I can do that again. And just leave the carrier sheet, all of it, in place until you're sure it's ready. We'll see if this one's done. Pretty close. Probably give that a little bit longer press. So sometimes when you're working with different materials and different brands of heat transfer, it just takes a little bit of experimentation. And then I would just keep track of, once you know what does work, keep a little notebook or something to write down what temperature you used, how long you pressed it, maybe even what the fabric was. And so you will know for future. And some heat transfers like a cold peel, like it wants it to completely cool down first. And some of them like to be hot. This one usually likes kind of a medium. You've let it cool down just a little bit. So see how slow I'm going? That's just to make sure that it actually comes off. One little bit. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this one is I'm just going to, now that the carrier sheet's off, I'm actually going to put the parchment paper on there again and press it again, just until I know that that's completely stuck on there. But that is what it should look like, and you just keep working at it and pay attention when you do get it right. Do we have any more questions, or we're good? Okay, well, hopefully you found that fun, and it's not as hard as I may have made it look. It just takes a little bit of practice. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. You can even just practice on, cheap dishcloths with small designs until you feel a little more comfortable with it. But yeah, that's heat transfer, and hopefully you enjoyed the class, and we will see you another time.